Hi, I'm James and welcome back to another review. Today we're reviewing the Team Yankee RDF light tank box set from Battlefront. If you're a Twilight 2000 gamer, you'll know this as the LAV75, and hopefully, as well as reviewing it, we can give you a little bit of the history of the vehicle. So let's have a look at the box. Box contains 5 vehicles, which is rather ironic because a grand total of 4 of these were made in real life. It's a vehicle that was developed but then never actually put into production. So let's have a look what we've got inside the box. Okay, we've got a set of cards. Now these are the typical Team Yankee cards. They're designed for the 9th Motorised Division, which was a unique high technology test division. We've got the company command card, which has 1 to 2 vehicles on it, and then the platoon, which has 2 to 4. So you can get a headquarters and 1 platoon from this. You've also got the 3rd card, you can see at the back, for the standard American Forces card, although the 9th isn't actually covered on that, which does give you a little bit of an issue and did confuse me. But you've still got on there all the movement orders and so on, so it is a useful little reference card. Now let's move on, let's look at the next step. I've got the box itself with the vehicles in, and you can see it's been packed by B20CT. I'm kind of hoping that's not their full name, but let's have a look what we've got inside. Well, we've got the 5 vehicles. Looking at them, you've got the 2 hatches in the hull, which are for the driver and the gunner, and then you've got a top hatch for the commander. You'll notice there's 2 sets of sights on the top. These are independent, which give a hunter-killer mode, so the commander could be already acquiring the next target through the thermal sights while the gunner was still engaging. It's got the rear bustle added, which is why it looks a little bit different to some of the pictures you see of the prototype. Stowage is all the same across the vehicles. I can understand why they've done that. I might kit bash a little with that later on. So what else have we got in here? Okay, the parts are metal. So it's a metal and resin kit then. We've got the tracks. Now I quite like the way they've done the tracks. As you can see on the ones on the right, they've actually marked them as right and left with big arrows, which is quite useful, but they've also keyed them with the right only having 1 block, the left having 2, so it's impossible to fit them the wrong way round. Suspension is actually based on the M113 series. A lot of the vehicle was actually based on that, although you struggle to tell that when you look at it. So we've got 5 pairs of tracks, a little bit of flash on them, nothing particularly drastic. What have we got in the next box? Okay, so here we've got all the other parts. We've got the 75mm Ares main gun, a little bit of flash on there as well. 75mm Ares gun was quite unusual. It was a small caliber for what it was designed to take on, which were Russian tanks, but it fired in bursts. It actually had a rate of fire of 60 rounds a minute. So the idea was you would fire a burst of perhaps 5 rounds that would hit in the same area, and that would take out the tank. You've also got 5 hatches, so they can be modelled open or closed, although the 2 hull ones are obviously fixed. And we've got 5 machine guns. These would, looking at them, it's hard to tell the scale. They look, looking at the stock, as if they're M240s, or if you're British like me, the Gympie. So let's put those back in, and we've still got another box. Oh no, that's a surprise, because the back of the box doesn't mention crew figures, whereas here we actually have a set of the standard American tank commanders, so that's quite useful. Unfortunately there's no decals or transfers if you're British. Battlefront seem to have moved away from putting those in the sets. Not an issue for me because there's not a lot of big surfaces to actually put the numbers on anyway. Regular viewers of the channel are going to know that my main wargaming rules that I use are 7 Days to the River Rhine by Roger Garish, published by Great Escape Games, and because it's an unusual vehicle that never actually made it into full-scale production, I've actually put the statistics up myself. These aren't official, they are just an idea. It's an interesting weapon to do the gun for, because of its high rate of fire but with a high penetration. It's actually reasonably effective. It will shred light armour, heavy armour it will struggle with. It finds it easy to hit because of the high rate of fire, and the gun was actually designed for use against aircraft as well, which is why it's got an anti-aircraft rating. So I said this was the initial of the 4 vehicles. Later versions changed to a 2-man crew with a fully remote turret, which had a cherry picker effectively built into it, so it gives the ability to raise the gun up to fire over cover. So if you want to go for a later version, which you can't really be done from this model, you'd have to do quite a bit of kit bashing for it, you can add that, and the final version also added stinger pods above the cherry picker gun. So again, I've given the option for doing that. These weren't fitted to the standard version that we have here. However, if it came into service, I can't see any reason why that wouldn't happen. So this is the Twilight 2000 version of the vehicle. There are a couple of slight differences from the model, but they're so small as to make no difference in scale. You'll notice it's got 3 return rollers, whereas the model has 1, and the model has the stowage baskets added to the rear, which is probably what would have happened on the real vehicle, because it is going to be somewhat cramped inside looking at the size of the vehicle. It was used initially by the 9th Infantry Division motorised, which is the version that they've shown there, although unusually for being in Iran it's actually in green. I would have thought it would have probably changed to a different scheme. I'm guessing that they just used the original prototype version's colour scheme. It was also used by the divisional armour of the light infantry divisions, which is quite useful in Twilight 2000 terms because you can then use it in pretty much any setting. And it was also used by the 82nd Airborne to replace the M551 Sheridans. These in game terms it was. Organisation wise, each battalion had 3 companies, each had 13 LAV75s. I'd suggest probably 3 troops of 4 and 1 in the headquarters. Slightly different to the organisation Team Yankee have given, but I wouldn't worry too much on that. And there was also a headquarters company with 2 LAV75s, 10 FAVs, which I'll be doing a video about shortly, 6 M18 mortar carriers. Now they were the proposed mortar version of the Bradley. It's quite probable in game terms you could replace those with M113 mortars, and 6 Stingers as an air defence platoon, which I find quite interesting given the fact that it did have an anti-aircraft capability. But then again, when they were writing, it's hard to criticise, because they were writing pre-internet and a vehicle which was only in a trial state, so there are going to be differences. So let's have a look at some of the painted up vehicles. I had to paint one in the trials green simply because it then looks like the Twilight 2000 version. You can see I've got quite a heavy weathering on this because it matched the one in the vehicle guide. Most would have probably been painted, however, in the MERDC scheme, so I've painted 2 up in that standard. You can see the Humvee in the background in the first picture there, and again, which is very useful just to give you an idea of how small this light tank actually is. So I painted up a few of those. The scheme was phased out for a standard NATO pattern camouflage, which used 3 colours. So I've actually painted up one in that pattern there. You can see it looks fairly standard pattern again, and it just helps break up the force. Because I'm painting it for Twilight 2000, the more disorganised the force actually looks, in some ways the better it is. Some Peter Pig infantry can be seen there as well, again to help you just get your scale comparison. When I started building these, I fancied doing something a little bit different, and one of the prototypes wasn't armed with the 75mm Ares cannon. Instead, it was armed with a 76mm gun. The idea being this was a fairly standard weapon around the world. People would have plenty of ammunition for it. So I decided I was actually going to make something that resembled that. What I did was used the spare barrel I had floating around from a 76mm Sherman of World War II fame, and added it instead of the Ares gun. Deciding how to use that then, I looked around for who would have been replacing recce vehicles around that time, and I noticed that the Danes were just finishing with the M41 DK1, which was their version of the Walker Bulldog tank. They'd extensively upgraded it, and interestingly they'd added a much more effective ammunition for it, supplied by AAI, who made the tank. I thought that it's probably logical that the Danes, with the M41 seeing the end of its service, could possibly be in the market for a vehicle like this. So the end result was I painted it up as a Danish vehicle using Danish camouflage, and you can just about see the Danish flag in some of the shots. Statistics for it are pretty similar to the ordinary version, but the gun is slightly less effective, and I also decided that because of the role the Danes would use it in, it would be a recce version in the Danes one as standard, rather than being an upgrade that you could use. I've also decided as a result, because it's a recce vehicle, to lower the break points, because it encourages recce vehicles then to be used in the correct role. Again, this is completely unofficial statistics, and in fact it's a vehicle that isn't even used by the Danes. As far as I know, was never even actually considered, but it just gives a bit of variety to a Danish force.